The welding sparks were flying like angry fireflies when I found my wife's suitcase open on the garage workbench. 3 in the morning, and there I was, nursing a Budweiser and trying to finish a repair job that should have been done hours ago. The blue flame from my torch cast dancing shadows across the concrete walls, and that's when the light caught something that made my blood run colder than a January morning in Ohio. A nurse costume, white, pristine, with one of those little red crosses. Next to it, a nun's habit, complete with the headpiece. And underneath both outfits, a 12-pack of Trojan rubbers and a travel-sized bottle of Absolute vodka. I set down my torch and picked up the nurse outfit, feeling the cheap polyester between my calloused fingers. Apparently, the church and hospital both have very specific dress codes for business trips, I muttered to the empty garage. My name's John Dorsey, JD to most folks, and I've been welding steel and fixing people's broken crap for 15 years in this Rust Belt town of Millfield. Population 12,000 on a good day, 11,000 when the smart ones leave for college and never come back. I married Megan Walsh when we were both 25 and stupid enough to think love conquered all. Now, at 38, I'm staring at evidence that my wife of 13 years has been playing dress-up games that don't involve me. I grabbed my beer and took a long pull, tasting the bitterness that had nothing to do with hops. The garage smelled like metal shavings and motor oil, familiar scents that usually calmed me down. Tonight, they just reminded me that I was a blue-collar schmuck married to a woman who worked at Henderson Logistics downtown, wearing business suits and talking about synergy and optimization, while I got my hands dirty keeping the world running. The suitcase was one of those expensive hard-shell numbers, not the beat-up duffel bag I'd been using since high school. Inside, along with the costumes and contraceptives, I found lacy underwear I'd never seen before, perfume that wasn't her usual drugstore brand, and a silk nightgown that cost more than I made in a day. But it was the phone that really got my attention. Tucked into the side pocket was a cheap burner phone, the kind you buy at gas stations when you don't want your calls traced. I flipped it open and scrolled through the messages. Most were from someone listed as Slick in the contacts. Can't wait for our weekend getaway, baby. Bring the nurse outfit. Hotel room is booked. Room 237. I'll be waiting. Tell JD you're at another boring conference. He's too stupid to check anyway. That last one hit me like a sledgehammer to the gut. Not because of the betrayal. I'd been suspecting something for months. The late nights, the sudden interest in professional development seminars, the way she'd started wearing makeup to take out the trash. No. What got me was the casual cruelty of it. The assumption that I was just some dumb welder who wouldn't notice his wife stepping out. I scrolled further back and found more messages, dozens of them going back 3 months. Plans, arrangements, intimate details that made my stomach turn. And then I found the name I'd been dreading to see. Cliff Hudson, Slick. My former best friend, the guy who'd been best man at our wedding, who'd helped me build this garage, who'd been coming over for Sunday football and barbecues for years. The same Cliff who worked at Morrison's Auto Body across town and had been married to Linda Hudson for 8 years. I set the phone down carefully, like it might explode. My hands weren't shaking. That would come later. Right now, I felt that cold, calculating calm that comes over you when you're about to do something that can't be undone. I walked over to my welding station and picked up one of my finest needles, the kind I used for precision work on delicate joints. Then I went back to the suitcase and one by one poked tiny holes in every single rubber in that 12-pack. Holes so small, you'd need a magnifying glass to see them, but big enough to let nature take its course. Congratulations, I said to the empty garage. You're going to be parents. I put everything back exactly as I'd found it, except for the phone. That I kept. I had a call to make. Cliff answered on the 4th ring, his voice thick with sleep. Hello? Hey there, Slick, I said, letting the nickname roll off my tongue like poison. It's your old buddy, JD. Sorry to wake you, but I've got some news that just couldn't wait. JD, what the hell, man? It's 3 in the morning. Is everything okay? Oh, everything's just peachy. In fact, it's about to get a whole lot more interesting. See, I just found out you and my wife are going to have something to celebrate real soon. The silence stretched out like a guitar string about to snap. I don't know what you're talking about, man. You sound drunk. Maybe you should... Congratulations, Cliff. You're going to be a daddy. Tell my wife she's homeless now. I hung up and immediately started loading Megan's belongings into my pickup truck. The suitcase, her jewelry box, the fancy clothes she'd bought with money from our joint account, her collection of self-help books about maximizing your potential. All of it went into the bed of my Ford F-150. The drive to Cliff's house took 12 minutes through the empty streets of Millfield, past the shuttered steel mill, past the Dollar General and the subway that stayed open until midnight for the third shift workers, past the high school where Megan and I had met in chemistry class. The irony wasn't lost on me. Cliff lived in a modest ranch house on Elm Street, the kind of place where working people raised their kids and mowed their lawns on Saturdays. His Mustang was in the driveway, the one he'd restored himself and babied like it was made of gold. I parked behind it, blocking it in. I carried the suitcase and 2 garbage bags full of Megan's stuff up to the front porch and set them down gently. Then I rang the doorbell and waited. The porch light came on, and I heard footsteps. The door opened, and there was Linda Hudson in a bathrobe, her hair messy from sleep, blinking at me in confusion. "JD, what are you doing here? It's the middle of the night." Linda was a good woman, the kind who brought casseroles to church potlucks and remembered everyone's birthday. She didn't deserve what was about to happen to her world, but she deserved the truth. "I'm sorry, Linda," I said, gesturing to the luggage. "But your husband's girlfriend left some things at my house. I thought she might want them back." Linda stared at the suitcase, then at me, then back at the suitcase. Her face went through a series of expressions: confusion, realization, and finally, a kind of resigned sadness that told me everything I needed to know. "She's not the first," Linda whispered, her voice barely audible. Those 4 words hit me harder than anything else that night. Not the first. How long had this been going on? How many other wives had stood on their porches at 3 a.m, accepting delivery of their husband's infidelity? "I'm sorry," I said again, because what else was there to say? Linda nodded slowly, then bent down to pick up the suitcase. "Thank you for bringing these by, JD. And I'm sorry, too." She closed the door softly, leaving me standing on the porch with my truck running, and my marriage officially over. As I walked back to the Ford, I saw a curtain twitch in the house across the street. Rosie Martinez, the neighborhood's unofficial news network, was getting an early start on what would undoubtedly be the biggest story to hit Elm Street in years. I drove home through the empty streets, past the 24-hour diner where the night shift workers grabbed coffee, past the police station where Officer Brady was probably dozing in his patrol car, past all the familiar landmarks of a life that had just been turned upside down. When I got back to the house, I sat in my truck for a long moment looking at the place Megan and I had bought 7 years ago. It was a modest 2-story colonial with vinyl siding and a front porch that needed painting. We'd been proud of it once, proud of the mortgage payments we made every month, proud of the small garden Megan had planted in the backyard before she got too busy with her career to care about tomatoes and marigolds. Now it just looked like a house where strangers used to live. I went inside and poured myself 3 fingers of bourbon, then sat at the kitchen table and waited for my wife to come home from wherever she'd been tonight. The clock on the microwave read 4:17 a.m. The house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of a train whistle from the freight line that ran along the edge of town. At 5:30, I heard Megan's Honda Civic pull into the driveway. Megan came through the front door like she owned the place, which technically she still did. Her heels clicked on the hardwood floor of the entryway, and I could hear her setting down her purse and keys on the little table by the door, the same routine she'd followed for years. "JD?" she called out. "Why are you up so early?" I stayed seated at the kitchen table, cradling my bourbon. "Just couldn't sleep. Funny thing about insomnia, gives you time to think, time to discover things." She appeared in the kitchen doorway, still wearing her business clothes from yesterday. Black slacks, white blouse, hair pulled back in a professional bun. She looked tired, but there was something else in her expression when she saw me sitting there with a drink at dawn. Wariness. Maybe even fear. "You've been drinking," she said, like that was the real problem here. "Just a nightcap. Or would that be a morning cap? Hard to tell when your wife's been out all night." I took a sip and let the whiskey burn away some of the anger. "How was your conference, honey? Learn anything interesting about logistics?" Megan's face went pale, but she recovered quickly. She'd always been good at thinking on her feet, one of the things that had attracted me to her back in high school. Now it just made her a better liar. "It ran late. We went out for drinks afterward to discuss the presentations. I should have called, but you were busy." "I get it. Important business. Speaking of which, you might want to check your suitcase. I think you forgot to pack a few things." The color drained completely from her face now. "What are you talking about?" "Well, for starters, you forgot to pack your husband's trust." Left that right here in the garage next to your nun costume and your boyfriend's love letters. Megan sat down heavily in the chair across from me. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The kitchen clock ticked loudly, marking the seconds of our marriage's death. How long? I asked. JD, I can explain. How long, Megan? She looked down at her hands, folded neatly on the table like she was praying. 3 months. With Cliff? She nodded. In our bed? No, she said quickly. Never here. I wouldn't. Oh, you have standards. How comforting. I finished my bourbon and set the glass down harder than necessary. Motels then? Hotel rooms? The backseat of his Mustang like a couple of teenagers? It just happened, JD. We didn't plan it. We were both going through rough patches in our marriages and... Don't. I held up a hand. Don't you dare make this about our marriage. Don't make this about rough patches or growing apart or any of that self-help book bullcrap you've been reading. You made a choice. You chose to lie to me for 3 months. You chose to sneak around with my best friend. You chose to make me look like an idiot in front of the whole town. Tears started rolling down her cheeks, but I felt nothing. The woman sitting across from me looked like my wife, but she was a stranger. The Megan I'd married wouldn't have done this. Or maybe she would have, and I'd just been too blind to see it. What do you want me to say? She whispered. I don't want you to say anything. I want you to pack whatever's left of your stuff and get out of my house. Our house, JD. Both our names are on the mortgage. Your stuff's already at Cliff's. Linda was real understanding about it. Turns out you're not his first side piece. Congratulations, you're part of a pattern. Megan's head snapped up. You told Linda? Didn't have to tell her much. She figured it out pretty quick. Seems like she's had practice. The look of horror on Megan's face might have been satisfying if I'd had any emotions left. But I felt hollow, like someone had reached inside and scooped out everything that mattered. You bastard, she said, and there was real venom in her voice now. You couldn't just talk to me about this. You had to humiliate me, ruin everything. I ruined everything. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. That's rich, Meg. Really rich. She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. This isn't over, JD. You think you can just throw me out like garbage? I've got rights. I've got a lawyer. Good for you. Hope he's better in court than Cliff is in bed. She slapped me then, hard enough to snap my head to the side. My cheek stung, but I just smiled at her. Feel better? Go to hell. Already there, sweetheart, already there. She stormed out, and a few minutes later I heard her car start up and tear out of the driveway. I poured myself another bourbon and watched the sun come up through the kitchen window. By 9 o'clock, my phone was ringing. First call was from my son Kyle, who was away at college in Columbus. Dad? What's going on? Mom just called me crying, saying you kicked her out of the house. Kyle was 19, a sophomore studying engineering, and the one good thing to come out of my marriage. He had Megan's brains but my work ethic, and I was proud of the man he was becoming. Your mother and I are having some problems, son. She's staying somewhere else for a while. Problems? Dad, she said you embarrassed her in front of the neighbors, that you're having some kind of breakdown. I'm fine, Kyle. Your mother made some choices and now she's dealing with the consequences. That's all I'm going to say about it. There was a long pause. Kyle was smart enough to read between the lines. She cheated on you. It wasn't a question. Like I said, she made some choices. I'm sorry, Dad. I'm really sorry. Not your fault, son. Not your problem either. You focus on school. This will all work itself out. After I hung up with Kyle, the phone started ringing again. First it was my brother Mike in Cleveland, then my sister Sarah in Pittsburgh. Word was spreading fast through the family network. Then came the calls from work. I had 3 jobs scheduled for the week, and people wanted to make sure I was still functional. By noon, I was sick of talking about it. I unplugged the landline and turned off my cell phone. That's when Rosie Martinez knocked on my door. Rosie lived across the street and had appointed herself the neighborhood's official information clearinghouse. She was 65, retired from the phone company, and had the instincts of an investigative journalist. She also made the best tamales in Millfield and had been kind to Megan and me over the years. JD, honey, she said when I opened the door. I brought you some lunch. Figured you might not be thinking about eating right now. She handed me a covered plate that smelled like heaven. Beef stew from the aroma. Thanks, Rosie. That's real kind of you. Can I come in for a minute? I think we should talk. I led her into the living room, and she settled into Megan's favorite chair like she belonged there. I saw what happened last night, she said without preamble. Saw you drop off those suitcases at the Hudson place. Saw Linda take them inside. I figured you might have. Cliff Hudson's a piece of crap, JD. Always has been. I've seen him sneaking around for years, different women, different cars. Linda's a saint for putting up with it as long as she has. Why didn't anyone ever say anything? Rosie shrugged. Not my business. But when he started sniffing around your wife, that made it my business. I like you, JD. You're good people. You knew about Megan and Cliff? Suspected. Saw them together at that motel out on Route 9 about a month ago. I was coming back from visiting my sister in Youngstown. Stopped for gas. Saw Megan's car in the lot. Saw Cliff coming out of one of the rooms. Why didn't you tell me? Would you have believed me, or would you have thought I was just a nosy old woman stirring up trouble? She had a point. A month ago, I would have defended Megan against any accusation. I would have been furious at Rosie for even suggesting such a thing. Besides, Rosie continued, some things a man has to figure out for himself. But now that it's out in the open, you need to know what you're up against. What do you mean? Megan's not going to just slink away quietly. She's got pride, and she's got friends. Brenda Miles, for one. They've been thick as thieves ever since Megan started working at Henderson Logistics. I knew Brenda. She worked in HR at the same company, a sharp-tongued woman in her 40s who'd never been married and seemed to take pleasure in other people's misery. She and Megan had become close friends over the past couple of years, bonding over their shared disdain for small-town life. What about Brenda? She's been filling Megan's head with ideas, women's liberation, financial independence, all that. Not that there's anything wrong with those things, but Brenda's got a mean streak. She's the one who probably encouraged Megan to step out in the first place. Great. So my wife had a support network of bitter women who saw my pain as entertainment. There's something else, Rosie said. I heard through the grapevine that Megan's been talking to a lawyer, Dave Brennan, the one who handles divorces for all the rich folks in town. She moves fast. She's scared, JD, scared and angry. That's a dangerous combination in a woman like Megan. After Rosie left, I sat in my empty house and tried to figure out what came next. I'd acted on pure instinct the night before, but now I needed a plan. Megan wasn't going to make this easy, and apparently she had allies. I walked out to the garage and looked at my welding equipment, my tools, the half-finished projects that represented my livelihood. I'd built this business from nothing, working 16-hour days and saving every penny to buy better equipment. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Or was it? If Megan had already talked to a lawyer, how long before they came after the business? The house? Everything I'd worked for? I picked up my cell phone and scrolled through the contacts until I found the number I was looking for. Coach, it's JD Dorsey. I need to talk to you. Dan Coach Braddock had been training fighters at Murphy's boxing gym for 30 years, and he'd seen every kind of human drama play out in the ring and outside it. He was 62 years old, built like a fire hydrant, and had the kind of street wisdom that came from growing up hard in Detroit before moving to Ohio to escape his own mistakes. I found him at the Anvil, the dive bar he'd bought 5 years ago when the previous owner drank himself to death. It was the kind of place where working men came to forget their troubles, and nobody asked too many questions about why you needed forgetting. JD, Coach said, sliding a beer across the scarred wooden bar. Heard you had some excitement last night. Word travels fast. Small town, big mouths. Rosie Martinez was in here an hour ago, buying a six-pack and spreading the news like it was gospel. I took a long pull of the beer. It was cold and bitter, exactly what I needed. What do you know about divorce lawyers, Coach? Enough to know they're like vultures. They circle around wounded marriages and pick the bones clean. He leaned against the bar, studying my face. Megan lawyered up already? That's what I hear. Dave Brennan? Yeah. Coach whistled low. Expensive taste. Brennan doesn't get out of bed for less than $5,000 up front. Where's she getting that kind of money? Good question. You want some advice, JD? That's why I'm here. You don't win this kind of fight with lawyers. Lawyers are like referees. They don't care who wins, they just want to get paid. You win with information. You win with leverage. You win by knowing things the other side doesn't want you to know. What kind of things? The kind of things that make people reconsider their positions. The kind of things that make expensive lawyers suddenly seem like a bad investment. I understood what he was getting at, but I wasn't sure I was ready to go down that road. I'm not looking to destroy anybody, Coach. I just want out of this marriage with my dignity and my business intact. Noble sentiment, but nobility's a luxury you can't afford when you're fighting for your life. And make no mistake, JD, that's what this is. Megan and her friends are going to try to destroy you. They're going to paint you as an abusive husband, a drunk, maybe even unstable. They're going to take everything you've worked for and leave you with nothing but debt and bad memories. You sound like you've been through this before. 3 times. Cost me 2 businesses and most of my hair. He ran a hand over his bald scalp. That's why I know what I'm talking about. I finished my beer and ordered another. The afternoon crowd was starting to filter in. Guys from the remaining factories, construction workers, a few retirees who had nothing better to do than drink and complain about how the world had gone to hell. So what do you suggest? Information gathering. Find out what Megan's really up to, who's helping her, what they're planning. Knowledge is power, JD. The more you know, the better you can protect yourself. You mean like spying on her? I mean like being aware of your surroundings, like paying attention to what's happening in your own life instead of walking around with your head in the clouds. That stung, but he wasn't wrong. I'd been oblivious to what was happening in my own marriage. How many signs had I missed? How many lies had I swallowed without question? There's something else, Coach said. You need to document everything. Every conversation, every threat, every attempt to manipulate you. Divorce court is like a boxing match. It's not always the best fighter who wins. It's the one who can prove he got hit the hardest. I spent the rest of the afternoon at the anvil, listening to Coach's war stories and trying to wrap my head around the idea that my life had become a battlefield. By the time I left, I had a plan. It wasn't pretty, and it wasn't noble, but it was practical. The first step was surveillance. I drove out to Henderson Logistics, a low-slung brick building in the industrial park on the east side of town. Megan's Honda was in the parking lot, along with Brenda Miles's red Camaro. I parked across the street behind a billboard advertising the local Ford dealership and settled in to wait. At 6:30, the 2 women emerged from the building together, talking animatedly. They got into Brenda's car and drove off. I followed at a distance, keeping several cars between us. They didn't go far. The Camaro pulled into the parking lot of the Sleepy Inn, the same rundown motel where Rosie had spotted Megan and Cliff. My stomach clenched as I watched them park and walk toward one of the rooms. But instead of going into a room, they sat down at a picnic table near the motel's office. I parked behind a dumpster and rolled down my windows, hoping to catch some of their conversation. Can't believe he humiliated me like that, Megan was saying. Dropping my things off at Linda's house in the middle of the night like I'm some kind of criminal. He's trying to intimidate you, Brenda replied. Classic abuser behavior. Make you feel small and powerless so you'll crawl back to him. Abuser? I'd never laid a hand on Megan in anger, never even raised my voice to her until this morning. But I could see how the narrative was being constructed. Dave Brennan says we can use that, Megan continued. Emotional abuse, public humiliation. It all adds up to a pattern of controlling behavior. What about the business? Can we go after that? Dave thinks so. Half of everything acquired during the marriage, including the value of his welding equipment and customer base, could be worth $50,000, $60,000. My blood ran cold. $60,000 was probably more than the business was actually worth, but fighting over it would cost me everything I had in legal fees. And the house? That's trickier. It's in both our names, but I've been contributing to the mortgage payments. Dave says we can argue that my income made the house possible. What about Cliff? How does he figure into all this? Megan was quiet for a moment. That's complicated. Dave says the adultery doesn't matter much in a no-fault state, but it could hurt me if JD's lawyer plays it right. Maybe it's time to cut Cliff loose. He's served his purpose. What do you mean? I mean you needed something to push you over the edge, to make you realize how unhappy you were. Cliff was that something. But now that you're free, do you really want to tie yourself to another small-town loser? I couldn't see Megan's face from where I was parked, but her body language suggested she was considering Brenda's words seriously. I don't know, she said finally. It's all happening so fast. That's exactly why you need to think clearly. This is your chance to start over, to build the life you really want. Don't waste it on Cliff Hudson. They talked for another 20 minutes, mostly about legal strategy and how to maximize Megan's settlement. By the time they left, I had heard enough to understand what I was up against. This wasn't just about a failed marriage. This was about a coordinated effort to destroy me financially and emotionally. Brenda wasn't just offering moral support. She was actively strategizing against me. I drove home and spent the evening making notes about everything I'd overheard. Coach was right about documentation. If this was going to be a war, I needed to keep detailed records of every battle. The next morning brought a new development. I was in the garage trying to focus on work when a car pulled into my driveway. It was a silver BMW, expensive and out of place in my blue-collar neighborhood. Dave Brennan got out of the car like he owned the place. He was 50-something, well-dressed, with the kind of confident swagger that came from never having to worry about money. I'd seen him around town, usually at the country club or the expensive restaurants where people like me couldn't afford to eat. "Mr. Dorsey, I'm Dave Brennan, and I represent your wife in the dissolution of your marriage." "Dissolution? That's a fancy word for divorce." "Indeed it is." He handed me a manila envelope. "These are the initial papers. You'll want to get yourself an attorney." I opened the envelope and scanned the documents. Legal jargon mostly, but the basic message was clear. Megan wanted half of everything plus alimony plus attorney's fees. "Your wife is being very reasonable," Brennan continued. "She's not seeking to punish you, just to ensure a fair division of marital assets." "Fair," I laughed. "Right. Mr. Dorsey, I understand you're upset. Divorce is never easy, but if you cooperate with this process, we can keep things civil and relatively inexpensive." "And if I don't cooperate?" Brennan's smile was all teeth and no warmth. "Then things get complicated and expensive for everyone involved." After he left, I called every divorce attorney in town. The first three were either too expensive or too busy to take my case. The fourth one, a guy named Tom Walsh, who worked out of a strip mall office, agreed to see me that afternoon. Tom was about my age, with tired eyes and a rumpled suit that had seen better days. His office smelled like coffee and disappointment. "Dave Brennan," he said after I explained the situation. "Yeah, I know Dave. He's good at what he does, which is taking working guys like you and bleeding them dry." "Can you beat him?" "Depends. How much money do you have?" "Not much, maybe 10,000 in savings. That'll get you started. But if this thing goes to trial, you're looking at 20, 30,000 minimum, maybe more." "I don't have that kind of money. Then we need to settle fast, or we need to find some leverage." "What kind of leverage?" Tom leaned back in his chair and studied me. "The kind that makes the other side want to settle quickly and quietly. The kind that makes expensive lawyers suddenly seem like a bad investment." He was echoing Coach's advice, but coming from a lawyer, it sounded more ominous. "I'm not looking to hurt anybody," I said. "That's admirable, but they're looking to hurt you. Sometimes you have to choose between being noble and being smart." I left Tom's office with more questions than answers, and a retainer agreement that would cost me $3,000 up front. Money I didn't have, for a fight I didn't want, against people who used to be my family and friends. That evening, I was back at the anvil, nursing a beer and trying to figure out my next move. The bar was crowded with the usual suspects: factory workers, construction guys, a few off-duty cops. The kind of people who understood what it meant to work for a living. "JD," a voice called out from across the room. "Come over here, buddy." It was Tommy Morrison, a guy I'd known since high school. He worked at the auto parts store and had always been friendly enough, though we'd never been close friends. I walked over to his table where he was sitting with three other guys I recognized from around town. "Sit down, have a drink," Tommy said, gesturing to an empty chair. "We were just talking about you." "Yeah? What about?" "About what a lucky son of a bitch you are," said Pete Kowalski, a guy who worked construction. "Getting rid of that stuck-up wife of yours. She always thought she was too good for this town," added Mike Chen, who ran the hardware store. "Too good for the rest of us. Cliff Hudson, too," said the fourth guy, whose name I couldn't remember. "Guy's been screwing around on Linda for years. About time somebody called him on it." I sat down and accepted the beer Tommy pushed toward me. These guys were trying to be supportive, but their words felt hollow. They didn't understand that I wasn't celebrating. I was mourning. "You know what you should do?" Pete said, leaning forward conspiratorially. "You should make them pay. Take them for everything they've got." "It doesn't work that way," I said. "She's the one with the lawyer." "So get a better lawyer," Mike suggested. "Sue her for alienation of affection or some crap." "This isn't a movie, guys. Real life doesn't work like that." "Maybe not," Tommy said. "But that doesn't mean you have to roll over and play dead. You've got friends in this town, JD. People who respect you. That's got to count for something." As the evening wore on, more people stopped by the table to offer their support and their opinions. Most of them meant well, but their advice ranged from impractical to illegal. By closing time, I was drunk and angry and no closer to a solution than I'd been that morning. I stumbled out of the anvil into the cool night air and nearly collided with someone coming up the sidewalk. Easy there, JD. It was Cliff Hudson. Seeing Cliff standing there under the streetlight was like getting punched in the gut. He looked the same as always. Average height, thinning brown hair, the kind of guy who'd been good-looking in high school but was slowly going soft around the edges. We'd been friends for 20 years, had stood up at each other's weddings, had shared countless beers and Sunday afternoon football games. Now, he was the man who'd been sleeping with my wife. JD, he said, holding up his hands like he was approaching a dangerous animal. I know you're pissed and you have every right to be, but can we talk? Man to man? Man to man? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. That's rich, Cliff. Real rich. Look, I know what this looks like. What this looks like? It looks like my best friend has been screwing my wife behind my back for 3 months. It looks like you've been sitting at my dinner table, drinking my beer, and lying to my face while you planned your next motel room adventure. It wasn't supposed to happen, JD. It just did. Megan was unhappy, and Linda and I have been having problems for years. So you decided to solve both your problems by destroying 2 marriages? Brilliant plan, Cliff. Really shows that strategic thinking that made you such a success in life. His face flushed red. You don't have to be an a-hole about it. I don't have to be a dick. You duck my wife and I'm the a-hole? Keep your voice down, he said, glancing around nervously. People are watching. Let them watch. Let the whole goddamn town watch. Maybe they should know what kind of man Cliff Hudson really is. You're drunk, JD. Go home and sleep it off. We can talk about this when you're sober. I'm drunk, but I'm not stupid. And I'm not going anywhere until you explain to me how you justify what you did. Cliff sighed and ran a hand through his thinning hair. I don't know what you want me to say. I'm sorry? Fine, I'm sorry. It shouldn't have happened. But it did, and now we all have to deal with it. You're sorry. I shook my head. 20 years of friendship and you're sorry. What do you want from me, JD? You want me to beg? You want me to get down on my knees and grovel? I want you to tell me why. Why her? Why now? Why behind my back instead of just telling me you wanted out of our friendship? Because I knew you'd react like this. I knew you'd go crazy and make everything worse. Make everything worse? Cliff, you were planning to run away with my wife. How exactly could I have made that worse? We weren't planning to run away together. It was just something that happened. A mistake. A 3-month mistake? With hotel rooms and costumes and plans for weekend getaways? He stared at me for a long moment, and I could see him trying to decide how much to admit. Megan told you about the costumes? Megan didn't tell me crap. I found them myself, along with your love notes and your cheap burner phone. You went through her things? They were in my garage, asshole. In my house, which, by the way, you're not welcome in anymore. JD, listen to me. Whatever you think was happening between Megan and me, it's over. She ended it yesterday. Said she needed to focus on her marriage. I stared at him in disbelief. Her marriage? Cliff, I threw her out of the house. I had our divorce papers served this morning. What marriage? Now it was his turn to look confused. What are you talking about? Megan said you guys were going to work things out. She said you just needed some time to cool down. When did she tell you this? This morning, she came by the shop, said she was staying with Brenda for a few days while you got your head together. And you believed her? Why wouldn't I? Look, JD, I know this is ducked up, but Megan loves you. She made a mistake, but she wants to fix it. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Cliff, your girlfriend hired Dave Brennan to take me for everything I own. She's not trying to fix our marriage. She's trying to destroy me. The color drained from his face. That's not... She wouldn't. She would, and she did. And if you think she's going to ride off into the sunset with you after she's done screwing me over, you're even dumber than I thought. I left him standing there on the sidewalk and walked to my truck. As I drove home, I thought about what he'd said. Megan had lied to him too, told him she was trying to save our marriage while simultaneously planning to destroy me in court. It was almost impressive, in a sociopathic kind of way. The next morning brought a new wrinkle. I was in the garage trying to focus on a welding job when my phone rang. It was Jim Henderson, the owner of Henderson Logistics and Megan's boss. JD? Jim Henderson. I hope you don't mind me calling, but I wanted to talk to you about a situation that's developed here at the office. What kind of situation? Well, it's about Megan, and some concerns that have been raised about her behavior. I set down my torch and gave him my full attention. What kind of concerns? I'd rather not discuss this over the phone. Could you come by the office this afternoon? Say around 3? I'll be there. Henderson Logistics occupied a modest building in the industrial park, the kind of place where small businesses tried to look bigger than they were. Jim Henderson was a decent guy in his 50s who'd built the company from nothing and treated his employees fairly. His office was functional rather than fancy. Metal desk, filing cabinets, a few certificates on the wall. He gestured for me to sit down and closed the door behind me. JD, I'm going to be straight with you. We've had some problems with Megan's work performance over the past few months. Missed deadlines, sloppy reports, unexplained absences. I see. But that's not why I called you. Yesterday, Megan came to me with some very serious allegations about you. She claimed you were stalking her, harassing her at work, making threatening phone calls. My stomach dropped. That's not true, Jim. I haven't contacted her at all except through our lawyers. I didn't think it sounded like you, but I had to take it seriously. I told her to file a police report if she felt threatened. Did she? No, and that got me thinking. So I did a little checking and I found some things that concern me. He opened a file folder on his desk and pulled out several sheets of paper. These are Megan's phone records for the past month. Company phone, so I have a right to review them. Take a look at the highlighted entries. I scanned the pages. There were dozens of calls to numbers I didn't recognize, many of them during business hours. The number highlighted in yellow? That's Dave Brennan's office. Megan called him 17 times in the past 2 weeks, mostly during work hours. The number in blue? That's a private investigator in Youngstown. A private investigator? Guy named Rick Santos. Specializes in divorce cases, surveillance, asset searches, that kind of thing. What would she need a private investigator for? That's what I wondered. So I called him, told him I was conducting a background check on a potential employee named Megan Dorsey, asked if he'd ever heard of her. And he said he couldn't discuss specific cases, but he confirmed that someone matching her description had hired him to conduct surveillance on her husband, paid him $2,000 cash. I felt like I'd been hit by a truck. She's having me followed? Looks that way. The question is, why? What's she hoping to find? I have no idea. I go to work, I go home, I go to the Anvil for a few beers. That's about it. That's what I figured. But here's the thing, JD. Megan's been using company resources to wage her divorce war. Company phone, company computer, company time. That's grounds for termination. You're going to fire her? I'm going to have to. But I wanted to talk to you first as a courtesy. This is going to get ugly, and I didn't want you to be blindsided. I thanked Jim and left his office with my head spinning. Megan wasn't just trying to destroy me in court. She was actively investigating me, looking for ammunition. But what could she possibly hope to find? That evening, I was back at the Anvil, trying to process everything I'd learned. Coach was behind the bar, wiping down glasses and listening to the usual complaints from the usual suspects. You look like crap, he said when I sat down. Feel worse than I look. I told him about my conversation with Jim Henderson and the private investigator. Coach listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker with each detail. She's building a case, he said finally, trying to paint you as unstable, dangerous. The harassment allegations, the surveillance, it's all designed to make you look like the bad guy. But I haven't done anything. Doesn't matter. Perception is reality in divorce court. If she can convince a judge that you're a threat, she gets a restraining order. Once you've got a restraining order on your record, everything else becomes easier for her. So what do? You fight back, but you do it smart. What does that mean? Coach poured himself a shot of bourbon and knocked it back. It means you stop playing defense and start playing offense. It means you find out what Megan and her friends are really up to, and you use that information to protect yourself. I'm not sure I'm cut out for that kind of thing, Coach. Then you better learn fast, because they're not going to show you any mercy. As if summoned by our conversation, the door to the Anvil opened, and Brenda Miles walked in. She scanned the room until her eyes found me, then walked over to the bar with the confidence of someone who owned the place. JD, she said, sliding onto the stool next to me. We need to talk. I don't think we have anything to talk about, Brenda. Oh, but we do. See, Megan's my friend, and I don't like seeing my friends get hurt. Your friend hurt herself when she decided to cheat on her husband. Your friend hurt herself when she married a small-minded loser who can't handle a strong, independent woman. Coach stepped forward, his bulk casting a shadow over both of us. "Lady, I think you should finish your drink and move along." "I'm not here to cause trouble," Brenda said, not backing down. "I'm here to offer JD some friendly advice." "I'm listening," I said. "Drop the divorce contest. Let Megan have what she's asking for, and this all goes away quietly. Keep fighting, and things are going to get very unpleasant for you." "Is that a threat?" "It's a reality check. Megan has resources you don't have. She has friends, connections, legal representation. You have what? A welding torch and a drinking problem?" "I don't have a drinking problem." "No? How many nights this week have you been in here drowning your sorrows? How many people have seen you stumbling drunk through town, ranting about your cheating wife?" She had a point. I had been drinking more than usual, and I had been talking about my problems to anyone who would listen. "Here's what's going to happen," Brenda continued. "Megan's going to get half the house, half your business, and alimony. You're going to pay her legal fees, and you're going to keep your mouth shut about Cliff Hudson. In return, she won't pursue harassment charges, and she won't tell the court about your alcohol abuse." "Alcohol abuse? We have witnesses, JD. People who've seen you drunk and belligerent. People who'll testify that you're unstable and potentially dangerous." I looked around the bar and realized that several people were watching our conversation with interest. How many of them would be willing to testify against me if the price was right? "You're bluffing," I said, but I didn't sound convinced even to myself. "Am I? You want to find out? Because I promise you, JD, this is the best deal you're going to get. Turn it down, and we'll bury you so deep you'll never dig your way out." She finished her drink and stood up to leave. "Think about it, but don't think too long. Megan's patience is running out." After she left, Coach and I sat in silence for several minutes. "Well," he said finally, "now you know what you're really up against. Yeah, I'm screwed. Maybe. Or maybe it's time to stop playing by their rules and start playing by yours." "What do you mean?" "I mean, it's time to find out what they're really hiding. Because people who make threats like that, they've got secrets of their own." The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in weeks. Maybe it was Coach's words, maybe it was Brenda's threats, or maybe I just reached the point where I had nothing left to lose. Either way, I knew what I had to do. My son Kyle had taught me enough about computers to be dangerous, and Megan had never been very good with passwords. She used the same one for everything, the name of our first dog followed by her birth year. It took me 15 minutes to hack into her email account from the computer at the public library. What I found there was worse than I'd imagined. The emails between Megan and Brenda went back 6 months, long before the affair with Cliff had started. They weren't just friends, they were co-conspirators. Brenda had been systematically poisoning Megan against me, encouraging her to see our marriage as a prison and me as her jailer. But that wasn't the worst part. I found emails between Brenda and Rick Santos, the private investigator. She'd paid him to follow me, but not to find evidence of wrongdoing. She'd paid him to create evidence. Doctored photos, fabricated witness statements, manufactured incidents that never happened. There were also emails between Brenda and Dave Brennan discussing strategy. They were planning to claim I'd been physically abusive, that I'd threatened Megan and Cliff, that I was an alcoholic who couldn't be trusted with custody of my own son. All lies. But lies that would be very difficult to disprove in court. The final piece of the puzzle was an email from Megan to her sister in California, dated just 3 days ago. "The plan is working perfectly. JD doesn't suspect anything. Brenda says we can probably get $60,000 out of the business, plus half the house value. I'll be able to start over somewhere new, maybe move out there with you. Cliff thinks we're going to be together, but he's just been a useful idiot. Once this is over, I never want to see him again." I printed out everything and drove straight to Tom Walsh's office. He read through the emails with growing amazement. "This is incredible, JD. This is conspiracy to commit fraud, perjury, probably a dozen other felonies. Can we use it?" "Hell yes, we can use it. But we need to be smart about how we do it. If we tip our hand too early, they'll claim the emails were fabricated." "So what do you suggest?" "We set a trap. Let them commit to their lies in court, under oath. Then we spring this on them." "When?" "There's a hearing scheduled for next week. Temporary support and custody arrangements. They'll probably try to get a restraining order against you at the same time." "And if they succeed?" "They won't. Not after the judge sees this." I left Tom's office feeling hopeful for the first time in weeks. But I wasn't done yet. There was one more thing I needed to do. That evening, I drove out to the warehouse district on the edge of town. It was a collection of old industrial buildings, most of them empty now that the factories had closed. Cliff used one of them to store cars he was working on, a side business he ran to supplement his income from the auto body shop. I found him there, working on a vintage Camaro under the harsh glare of fluorescent lights. He looked up when he heard my footsteps, and I saw fear flash across his face. JD, what are you doing here? We need to talk, Cliff. Really talk this time. If you're here to beat the crap out of me, just get it over with. I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here to help you. He set down his wrench and wiped his hands on a shop rag. Help me with what? With understanding what Megan and Brenda have really been doing. I pulled out copies of the emails and handed them to him. He read them slowly, his expression changing from confusion to disbelief to anger. She called me a useful idiot. That's the least of it. Keep reading. When he finished, he looked up at me with something like shame in his eyes. JD, I had no idea. I thought she cared about me. She cared about using you to destroy my marriage so she could take half of everything I own. But why? I mean, why go through all this? Why not just ask for a divorce? Because a simple divorce doesn't pay as well. She needed to make me look like the bad guy so she could justify taking more. Cliff sat down heavily on a work stool. I've been such a fool. We both have. But it's not too late to make this right. What do you mean? I mean, you can testify about what really happened. Tell the court that Megan pursued you, not the other way around. Tell them about the lies she told you. And what do I get out of it? You get to keep your marriage. Because Linda doesn't know about the other women, does she? The ones Brenda mentioned in her emails? Cliff's face went white. You wouldn't. I don't want to. But if you don't help me stop this, I'll have no choice. Megan and Brenda are planning to destroy both of us, Cliff. The only way to stop them is to work together. He stared at the concrete floor for a long moment, then nodded slowly. What do you need me to do? The hearing was scheduled for Tuesday morning at the county courthouse. I arrived early, wearing my only suit and carrying a briefcase full of evidence. Tom Walsh was already there, looking confident for the first time since I'd hired him. Megan arrived with Dave Brennan and Brenda Miles. She looked professional and composed, like a wronged woman seeking justice. Brenda sat in the gallery, radiating moral support. The hearing began with Brennan presenting Megan's case. She took the stand and, under oath, painted a picture of me as an abusive alcoholic husband who had threatened her and her friends. She claimed I'd been stalking her, harassing her at work, and making her fear for her safety. It was a masterful performance. If I hadn't known the truth, I might have believed it myself. Then it was Tom's turn. Your Honor, we have evidence that Mrs. Dorsey's testimony is not only false, but part of a deliberate conspiracy to defraud my client. Brennan objected, but the judge allowed Tom to continue. He presented the emails, one by one, showing the jury how the entire case had been fabricated. The courtroom was dead silent as the judge read through the evidence. Megan's face went from confident to confused to terrified as she realized what was happening. Mrs. Dorsey, the judge said finally, do you have any explanation for these communications? Megan looked at Brennan, but he was staring at his notes, probably calculating how quickly he could withdraw from the case. Those emails were taken out of context, she stammered. Out of context? The judge held up one of the printouts. You wrote, and I quote, the plan is working perfectly. JD doesn't suspect anything. What plan were you referring to? I don't remember writing that. Are you claiming these emails are fabricated? I don't know. Maybe. That's when Tom played his ace in the hole. He called Cliff Hudson to the stand. Cliff testified about how Megan had pursued him, how she'd told him she was planning to leave me anyway, how she'd used their affair as justification for taking half of everything I owned. He corroborated every detail in the emails. By the time he finished testifying, Megan was crying and Brenda had slipped out of the courtroom. The judge didn't deliberate long. Mrs. Dorsey, I find your testimony to be not only false, but perjurious. Mr. Brennan, I'm referring this case to the district attorney for possible criminal prosecution. As for the divorce proceedings, I'm awarding Mr. Dorsey full custody of all marital assets, plus attorney's fees. It was over. Just like that. Outside the courthouse, Megan tried to approach me, but I walked past her without a word. She'd made her choices, and now she had to live with the consequences. Cliff was waiting by my truck. JD, I want you to know how sorry I am about everything. I know you are, Cliff, but sorry doesn't fix what's broken. Is there any chance can we ever be friends again? I looked at him for a long moment. He was a weak man who'd been manipulated by a stronger woman, but he was also the man who'd betrayed 20 years of friendship for a few months of sex. No, I said finally. We can't. 6 months later, I was in my garage, working on a custom welding job for a client in Cleveland. Business was good, better than it had ever been. Word had gotten around about the divorce case, and somehow that had translated into more work. Maybe people respected the fact that I'd fought back and won. Megan had left town shortly after the hearing. I heard she'd moved to California to stay with her sister. Brenda Miles had been fired from Henderson Logistics and was facing criminal charges for fraud. Dave Brennan was under investigation by the state bar. Cliff and Linda were trying to work things out, though I heard it wasn't going well. Some things, once broken, can't be fixed. My son Kyle had transferred to a school closer to home so he could help me with the business. He was turning into a fine young man, and I was proud of him. As for me, I was learning to be alone again. It wasn't easy, but it wasn't the worst thing in the world either. I had my work, my friends at the anvil, and the satisfaction of knowing that sometimes, if you're smart and patient and willing to fight for what's right, the good guys actually do win. I was just finishing up the welding job when I heard a car pull into my driveway. Through the garage window, I saw a familiar figure getting out of a Honda Civic. Megan. She looked different, thinner, older, like the past 6 months had aged her 5 years. She walked slowly toward the garage, her shoulders hunched against the October wind. Hello, JD. Megan, can we talk? I don't think we have anything to talk about. Please, just 5 minutes. Against my better judgment, I set down my torch and gave her my attention. I came to apologize, she said, for everything, for the affair, for the lies, for trying to destroy you in court. Okay, you apologized. Now what? I want to try to explain why I did it. I know why you did it. You wanted money and you wanted out. Brenda convinced you that I was holding you back from some better life. It was more complicated than that. No, it wasn't. You made choices, Megan, bad choices. And when those choices had consequences, you tried to make me pay for them. She started crying then, the kind of desperate tears that come when you realize you've lost everything that mattered. I know I hurt you. I know I can never make it right. But I want you to know that I did love you once. What we had was real, even if I threw it away. Maybe it was real once. But it wasn't real when you were planning to take everything I'd worked for. It wasn't real when you were lying in court trying to make me look like a monster. I know, and I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't give me back 13 years of my life, Megan. Sorry doesn't give me back the trust I had in people. Sorry is just a word. She wiped her eyes and nodded. You're right. I wanted you to know that I realize what I lost, what I threw away. What you threw away was the chance to be happy with what you had instead of always wanting something more. I know that now. Good for you. But knowing it now doesn't help either of us. She stood there for another moment like she was hoping I'd say something to make her feel better about what she'd done. But I had nothing left to give her. Goodbye, JD. Goodbye, Megan. I watched her drive away, then went back to my welding. The blue flame danced and sparked, joining 2 pieces of metal into something stronger than either piece had been alone. Funny thing about welding, if you don't know where the sparks will fly, you'll end up burned. Some folks never learn that lesson. Others learn it too late to do any good. But sometimes, if you're careful and patient and willing to do the hard work, you can take something broken and make it whole again. Not the same as it was before, but stronger, better. I finished the job as the sun was setting over Millfield, Ohio. Another day's work done, another small victory in the ongoing battle to build something worthwhile out of the raw materials life gives you. It wasn't the life I'd planned, but it was the life I'd earned. And that was enough.